well past our scheduled start time. Thank you for the grace as we had a special meeting that went long. With that, we are ready to call tonight's city council meeting to order. And Jolene, can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Erickson.
Here.
Husnick.
Here.
Valento. Here. Roberts.
Here.
Mayor Bain.
Here. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, we have an agenda before you this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And our agenda is approved. Our next item this evening is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of your choosing. And I will note that we do have a public hearing scheduled this evening, and so if you are here to talk about the public hearing on 932 2nd Avenue Northwest, you are welcome to address council either here during open forum or during the public hearing. Either is fine. And then that is the only other time scheduled this evening for public comment. So if you want to speak, now is your time. With that, we'll open up open forum with Wendy. Is it Hatchner? If you could approach the podium, and if you could start with your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, thank you. I am Wendy Hetchner. I live at 8595 North Shore Trail here in Forest Lake. I'd like to thank each of you, Mayor Bain and the council members. I know that you guys have just difficult jobs, and I'm not sure if this is correct protocol, but I wanted to express my concerns because we saw some information in the paper about the repavement of North Shore Trail, which is fantastic. It obviously needs it terribly because it's in terrible shape. My concern is for all of the baby strollers and the people that have a baby stroller and 2 dogs and a toddler. That shoulder is so small. And this was probably before any of you were here, but then when they did some repavement, then they also put rock shards next to the road. So the shoulder is already difficult to navigate for bikers and for pedestrians. And I don't know how you feel, but when I go to other communities and I see, like at White Bear, how they've dedicated more and more walking and biking trails for their citizens, and you know, I feel downtown is much better and the trail here is fine, but I feel like everybody almost needs a car to get around North Shore Trail because of the safety concerns. So I'm begging of you, if it's possible, to somehow widen the shoulders, or if it's possible even to shift the painting of the road so that there's maybe a two-way bike and pedestrian on one side of the trail, or of the road, excuse me, so that it's more safe at least most of the time, except when people cross one another. I know that there are also opportunities to put, you know, we wouldn't need an entire cement block all the way, but some, you know, some kind of barrier that discourages cars from going so fast. Speeding is a huge issue on our road. And there are people who regularly go by our house 60 miles an hour in what is designated as a 30 downtown and a 35 out by us. We even had our mailbox. We requested to move our mailbox over to our side of the road because it's so dangerous even to cross. And so I wish that there were some magic fix, but I hope that you would consider something to help with the pedestrians on that road. And in the 12 years that I've lived here, I have rarely seen anybody pulled over, like even downtown when there's a flashing light that obviously shows people to slow down, and they don't. They like barrel through. So I love our police officers, and I'm super grateful that we have them. But if there's anything to get people to slow down more on North Shore Trail and to make it more safe for pedestrians and bikers, and yeah, That would be amazing.
Very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Next open forum, Phil Hatchner.
I do live with her, so we'll cover the same address. Yeah, so you're getting a husband and wife too, for kind of rare. Different issue, but we met with some neighbors yesterday that were selling their house, and they were shocked to share with us that they just found out that the people weren't going to live in it. They were going to VRBO it and Airbnb it out. So a number of us neighbors were getting together and talking about what were maybe some thoughts or concerns about that. And I was shocked to go online and find out that there's no rental license required of any sort in Forest Lake. Is that true, I guess, first? Is that, okay. We lived in Blaine prior, and we rented out our house when we moved here, and we also had another house we rented out that we originally had gotten for a sister. Always had to have rentals, you know, it's a safety issue, you know, fire codes, you know, not to mention all of the issues of what's the protocol for noise, what's the protocol for, can you have 45 cars in the driveway? Can you have, you know, parties of 75? So I just encourage you to look into it and say, is there something we can have? Because you can hardly go a week without looking on the news and cities all over are saying, we got to deal with this because it's bubbling up all over the place. I don't begrudge anyone opportunity to make money. That's fine. But we need to have some basic understanding so neighbors aren't thinking one thing and the owners and the renters that are coming in are thinking something different. So I just encourage you to look into and see if there's something we can even take, you find that's great from another city, and let's grab it and use it, okay? So thank you for your time, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in open forum this evening? Jolene, do we have anyone online?
Not to speak, Your
Okay. Yes. Yes, if you would come to the podium.
Eugene Hurstel, 10234 204th Street North. I would agree with the gentleman. The reason is because some of these homes can have, they rent it out, they might rent it out to a party, and it can be loud, and and especially on the lake and whatever, and have some problems. And I was viewing the Scandia meeting the other week, and they have some real problems on Bone Lake. And there's no stipulations about what they can have and do and stuff. So I think it would be a good idea to, you know, make sure that there's some type of rental agreements or whatever with the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in open forum? All right. Not hearing anyone, we'll close open forum and bring the meeting back to council for the consent agenda. Council, for your consideration on our consent agenda this evening is 6A through 6K. I know we have a suggestion to move 6B off of consent. And so with that, I would move that council approve 6A and then C through K. Is there either a second or any other changes?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And our consent agenda is approved.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion that we
Thank
approve
you.
the minutes from the June 10th, 2024 regular council meeting.
Very good. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain?
Abstain.
One abstention. Motion carries. And we'll move on to our regular agenda. Our regular agenda this evening is consideration of 932 Second Avenue Northwest. Let's hear first from Abby's going to walk us through. Consideration is for both a public hearing, and then there is a comprehensive plan amendment for council under Resolution 624-2403, and then also a zoning map amendment. Abby, if you could just give us all information. We'll do a round of questions that council may have after Abby's presentation, and we'll open it up to public hearing and then bring back to council for consideration. Sound okay?
Sounds like a great plan.
All
Thanks,
right.
Mayor Bay and members of the council. Allison Donnelly of 932 2nd Street Northwest and Doug Amundsen have applied for a two-part application. It's a comprehensive plan amendment to change the subject property from rural residential to highway commercial, as well as a zoning map amendment to change it from rural residential to limited industrial. Included in your staff report tonight packet were a series of maps that highlighted the property that we're talking about. Give me just a second. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Just to the north of the intersection of Highway 61 and where 8 starts to go into 35. Up in that northwest corner is 932 2nd Street Northwest. It's kind of oddly addressed off of Forest Road there. It's been used as a daycare center for a very long time. The applicant or the property owner did market this for some time, unsuccessfully wasn't able to find another childcare business, but has found Precision Exteriors would like to purchase the property and convert it into their office and warehouse for their business needs. Included in your packet too was showing the existing land use. So this is our 2040 comprehensive plan. Our future land use says that we want to keep that rural residential. However, just to the north of it, and again, the only other property really accessed off of Forest Road in this location, has that future land use guided as highway commercial. The highway commercial guidance really is for businesses that support the community. This comprehensive plan, or excuse me, the zoning map amendment also guides this or has this zoned for rural residential. The change would be proposed to go to the limited industrial, the B3 zoning district. The rural residential guidance is a little odd to staff. These are the sorts of questions that staff ask, how did we get here? We think that it's likely because most of the property was undeveloped, because it's got a very high amount of wetland and daycares are allowed in the rural residential district, that we didn't change this and guide this for that highway commercial. However, in looking at it and looking at some of the goals in the comp plan, our natural resource goals of the protection of the existing wetlands on the site, we talk about housing infrastructure staging. There currently is no infrastructure in this area, no urban infrastructure planned for this area. And generally, our economic development goals really want to make Forest Lake a good place to conduct business. So trying to find ways that we are making property more eligible for businesses to be able to change over is a good thing where appropriate. The city did participate in a neighborhood public meeting on May 29th, 2024. There were members of the public there that were able to talk with the current owner and the future owner. Planning Commission did hold a hearing on June 12th, 2024. That was a public hearing. Both based on all of the information included in your packet, the public opportunities, both staff and the Planning Commission do recommend both the comprehensive plan amendment and the zoning map amendment. So tonight for your consideration, you have a resolution for the comprehensive plan amendment and an ordinance for the zoning map amendment. Both of these, as written in the conditions of approval, indicate they don't become effective until the Met Council has approved that comprehensive plan amendment. So as a reminder, we start the process. We say, this is okay, let's go forward and submit to the Met Council. If they're in agreement, then the whole thing can be finalized. Does the council have any questions for me?
Any questions, council? My only question is how we ended up here, and I think you answered that with the previous land use. And from my perspective, it makes sense to consider the changes as made. Council, any questions before we open up for public hearing? All right. With that, we are going to open up the public hearing. If you are here and would like to address council on this topic, I invite you to come to the podium now, and we'll open the public hearing. Anyone interested in this topic? I'll ask Jolene. Jolene, is there anyone online?
No interest for comment, Mayor.
Okay. Keep it open just a few more minutes, a few more seconds, not minutes. All right, not seeing anyone come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring conversation back to council. Council, for your consideration tonight, and Abby, I just want to confirm that I've got this right. It's two actions requested, is that right?
That is correct.
All right. It looks like we may be ready for a motion unless anyone has any discussion topics.
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 06-24-2403, approving the proposed comprehensive plan amendment.
I'll second it.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Motion carries. Looks like
Madam Mayor, I'll
we're-
make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 739, an ordinance amending the City of Forest Lake official zoning map, rezoning property located at 932 Second Street Northwest, PID 05.032.21.42.0003, from rural residential to B3 limited industrial commercial.
Very good. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion carries. All right. Our next item this evening is item 7B, which is Resolution 624-2404, which is accepting a donation from the Chamber for the Veterans Memorial in the very generous sum of $1,000. And with that, I would approve that, I would move that council approve Resolution 624-2404 with gratitude. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion carries. That ends our action agenda this evening. We do have one discussion topic, a lengthy discussion topic with a lot of information. And so as we move into this workshop session, you will find us in a less formal setting, more informal. Anything that we discussed related to this capital improvement plan item that will require future action will come back before council at an official meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin and get us started.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So included in your packet, as Mayor Bain said, is a lot of information related to our capital improvement plan. So there's a little background for how we got to this point. For the first time last year, the City Council adopted that 10-year capital plan. This capital plan is an important part of the city's budgeting process as it lays out not just what we're looking at for the next year's budget, but how future years are going to look and how decisions made for next year's budget and how that can impact future years down the road. With all that information provided, the city did implement the new capital planning software this year. Therefore, you see it's different from what was presented last year, where it was pretty much done on Excel spreadsheets. I want to thank the department heads for the amount of work that they did to submit all these forms to myself to help compile this information as well. This software, looking at it, from this first year looking at it, is going to be a big benefit to city staff, as it will be easier to update annually going forward. It provides a lot more information on what we're buying. For example, a pickup truck. Well, what is that? It's replacing this unit number. It's a new truck because of increased staff or things of that nature. So it provides a lot more description on what it is and justification for why things might be needed. So this is viewed as a big benefit to staff, but also city council to have that information in front of you as we look at this 10-year plan and update it annually. Based on our budget priorities workshop that we had earlier this year, it was that one of the priorities was to keep going with this plan and maintain that and make everything in this plan a priority with that. And also from that work session were a couple new items that came out of it that are built into this plan. One of them being the city aesthetics and median landscaping. Those are included in this plan. They are slated in for 2025 and 2026, split with $375,000 in 25 and $350,000 in 2026. It is important to note that currently these are just being held in Fund 211, which is our improvements fund, where our streets are normally funded out of, but that there is not a specific funding source tied to that. Meaning, is it a special tax levy to pay for that? Is it issuance of debt? as we need to have some further discussions on what type of scope we want for those landscaping projects. Also, one of the priorities was the downtown shoreline / boat launch projects. Staff slated this in for 2026. Right now, it's put in there for $1.9 million. And with that dollar amount, staff determined that if to move forward with this plan, that debt would be issued for that. So we're really looking at this. The 10-year plan is reviewed and updated annually by staff and city council. Included in your packet is all the purchases in the 10-year plan from 2025 through 2034. While it's important to look at that 10-year and understand what's on the horizon so we can plan for the future, we really encourage city council to look at the next couple years, the next 2-3 years, to see if there's any specific questions that you have for projects or purchases that are coming up, as that does guide us into what needs to happen at the preliminary budget meeting in August. This will get shared with our consultant, Ellers, who is helping put together the financial management plan to update that going forward as well. So really what we're looking for at this meeting is to answer any questions you may have, any guidance or changes that you would like to see, so we can share this information and get that built into a comprehensive financial management plan, as well as prepare for the preliminary budget meeting in August. So with that, this maybe help discussion. There's a lot of attachments that were included with this. I believe it is on, let me just get to the page quick. It'd be page 129 of your packet. I like this one because it breaks it down by the projects by year. It shows
129.
129, yes. It just breaks down the projects by year. So starting in 2025 and going forward. So as I said, really looking at the whole plan in general right now, but really focusing in on those first 2 or 3 years. This shows those projects that staff has slated in for those years. For the most part, these projects are what was presented last year. There were some changes made based just on, as we said, we review it annually, can wait a year, project costs have been updated. The nice thing about this software is we can add inflationary numbers down the road, so based on the trends we're seeing in certain purchases, our costs going up 3% a year, can easily change that, so we know what it's going to cost in 5 or 10 years and things like that. So with that, I would just open it up to any questions you have on whether it's the process of this new software, or if it's specific questions that you have maybe on projects, or it's really just presented for that informational purposes, that this is what will be seen in that August preliminary budget meeting, unless staff hears otherwise.
So Kevin, I think one of the things I appreciated about the format last year, and this is great, don't get me wrong, but maybe it's in here, you can point me to the page, but like just looking at the park improvement fund, for example, where we've slated all these projects, you had a spreadsheet that kind of showed, okay, this fund balance is going to be ebbing and flowing. Is that in here somewhere?
That is not in here somewhere. That will be coming later on once we send this to our consultant with ours and the full financial management plan, and also in that August workshop. So when you see like the park improvement fund, that when I looked at it internally, where these projects are slated in there, they're following the same levy projections that were last year, and it's broken out by, if it's the park improvement fund, those are funded as pay-as-you-go type projects, meaning that there's fund balance there, is either supported by tax levy, park dedication funds, or some other revenue source that the city has received. And for projects, for example, that are bigger parks, Fenway comes to mind, those are slated as park improvement bonds as a funding source, saying that if you want to do this project, that one's a few years out, if I remember correct, there will be bonds that are going to have to be issued for that. So yes, it is coming. This is more with a change in how we're doing the budget this year, and with this new software, getting these projects out in front of you to see if you have any questions on those, so that we can get those slated in to come the the budget in August. We have your priorities, we have your direction for where you would like to see that levy at. So given those constraints that we've already discussed, we will get those things slated in there to make sure that we fall within that, those guidelines.
And
Thank you.
does this plan reflect the funding levels that were anticipated last year? So last year, when we walked through the plan, we had kind of general fund funding a certain amount, and we cut that for 2024, but then that number was anticipated to go back up for 2025. Is that kind of what's contemplated in the current expense levels?
Correct. You're right. Right now, we're following the same plan where generally speaking, everything for 20 has been slated in, is still consistent with the plan that was presented last year. Like, for example, the park improvement fund, we had originally proposed last year to bump that tax levy up to $500,000. Council increased that up to $100,000. But in that 10-year plan was that we would be coming back with the $500,000 levy in 2025. This plan reflects that that is the plan and following that same plan as last year. Streets, keeping streets consistent for what it was bumped up to last year. Capital equipment fund following the plan to that we want to pay for this equipment as we go and not issue equipment certificates. Like I said, this is reviewed annually, cost increases, so there might be slight adjustments for that to keep going, especially if we're looking at paying, for example, fire trucks in the future to have cash available to pay for that instead of issuing equipment certificates like we're having to do this year. So all that will be coming to council. This is a new process. It's different. It's kind of a transition year for how this is looking. It's more that to follow the calendar for what we were looking at, what's been given the council before. Just wanted to get these out in front of you now, so if there's any specific changes or questions you had, we can stay ahead of the game.
One thing, I think I may know this just from conversations with Kristina. I'm not sure we've talked about it at the council level, and I just want to validate that it's correct. So I understand that providing this back to Ellers is going to do some more, should we say, sophisticated revenue modeling, right? So that the levy impact will have some better, can someone tell me what's better about it? I don't want to, I'm going to misstate it if I attempt, but.
So what Ellers is doing this year is it's a more of a comprehensive plan, is taking this plan and then also projecting out, taking our general fund and all levies. And with that, we're going to factor in growth projections, which we're not only see, well, what's the percent increase in the levy, it's going to show, well, what's it do to the city's tax rate based on growth projections? What's it going to do to the dollar increase to each house by every year, not just what's the increase for that given year. So it's a more comprehensive tool that will show more of that information than what you had saw last year. Last year's this, well, here's the percent levy increase for the next 10 years based on our levy. Now it'll be like, well, this is what our tax rate's gonna do based on our plans and growth projections. Is it gonna stay around, for example, that 40%? Are you gonna see that increase? And also show, well, what's it gonna do to the average household increase in their property tax bill as it relates to the city. Ellers is assisting with that this year with the plan that I will take that over next year, just with everything going on, just to help get that implemented and started. Looking at it as something that it'll just be part of our annual updating process. The template will be there. We'll update any projections and growth, any changes in the tax levy, any changes in our 10-year plans. Rolling into that model, so we're consistently updating and using that to help guide us in the current year budget with the understanding of how does that affect future years and how can we better plan for that.
Kristina?
Mayor,
please.
Council, can I just, because I know this is new and it may be harder to understand when you haven't seen something new and trying to understand how all the pieces fit together when there's still some to come, right? This document, really, like Kevin said, your focus should be on the next year or two and focus on if you want to do those projects. I think if the issue of whether you want to do it or not is the impact on the taxes, you'll see that when you see the Ellers one. But try and think about, are these the projects that you want to have coming up in the next 2 years? Because that obviously impacts what they do. So if that kind of helps you understand how the pieces will eventually fit together to get to where I think y'all want to go and understand what the impact is to people's pockets on this, this is that first step of looking at it. And it is hard to track in here with the way you have so many different funds, and staff has taken the liberty to decide when you'll bond for things versus when you'll just use straight general levy, and those will be discussions once you start identifying issues with the tax levy amount, where we can talk about options maybe to address concerns that come up later.
Mayor?
Yes, please.
Question for you. So is this budget time conversations? Do we have a workshop to go through some of these things? I see some pretty big ticket items like 1.4 for the shoreline thing that I just don't know if we've had much conversation. There's one of $700,000 to replace irrigation at Castlewood.
That's tonight. This is your workshop.
This is the
This is it.
workshop. So you want us to do a dive on
I
some
mean,
of
that
these
was the
things?
hope,
Like,
you know, again, it's a lot, so focus at least on the next year, maybe 2 years, you know, as Kevin pointed you to that sheet that shows it by year, because I know there's a lot of projects in here. I would focus on those until you get more familiar with it. Then there'll be less change, and you'll understand year by year as this goes on, and we'll be able to more easily pull out and identify the new changes versus everything is new to you this year. So I do think if you see something in 25 or maybe 26 that you want to talk about, that's what we really wanted to hear back from you tonight. And we can talk in to the level, and Kevin will know better than I, you know, how we plan to fund things, whether it was borrowing, general levy, park dedication funds, whatever it might be. But that was really the hope for tonight, that you could look at least next year, hopefully the next 2 years.
So a couple things stood out to me as I looked at, as I just kind of scrolled down. And I was reviewing more for timeline on when projects are being introduced, and then my own personal knowledge of generally what's included in that project, and I was kind of trying to gauge my own comfort level of, does it seem like it's on pace? Like, yes, I'm going to be ready to make this decision given what I know right now. And a couple of things stood out. One is, I would say broadly, and I know the park shoreline is kind of a last minute add based on our last discussion, but given the proximity of that and the size of that project, getting that vetted and some more detail around that, I think would be helpful. And then broadly, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just remembering all of the park projects coming into the 10-year plan a little late in the process and with not a lot of detail. And so I think when we saw it as that 10-year plan was rolled out, there was some desire on the part of council to certainly understand more of what was being contemplated, and it's probably also the time of like, yes, a park commission would be fantastic to also have help vet through that. As I was looking at more near-term projects, it's this Lakeside Memorial Park, just making sure, just given the size, specifically the shoreline project, it's just given the size and making sure that we are ready to dedicate that amount that soon.
So, Mayor, that makes me think of one other point that I think is important for y'all to understand. The last 192, 194 pages of this is really those project details. Each project has detail now. You will know what's in there, or at least you will. I have a bunch of red lines to go over with staff in a couple weeks to try and pull out that detail. So you know, for example, we know this now because we went through the exercise with North Shore Trail. If there was a trail plan for that, right? Let's have that have it noted whether or not it's included in the CIP before you get to that point of, you know, doing specifications, right? At least you have that high level understanding of what that costs include. So I wanted to mention that too, because I know it seems overwhelming, but understand that those last 192 or so pages are really just, that's because there's 192 projects you have in here, and each one of them has that level of detail, so. But sorry, so if you wanted to dive into the Lakeside one, if you know what project number it is, we can look to that to pull up the detail.
Just had the project number.
Or what other questions you had.
The other one that jumped out at me was the proximity of size of the Southwest Stormwater Project. And I know, I suspect that this is the project we're getting state bonding money for. And so it is partially, maybe fully funded, but also council will be asked to make some large decisions on a very large project.
I think that's one of the things too that I'd like to work with staff as far as the financing. There's nothing, there's no grants funding source in here, right? So, or bonding, or, outside sources, that's not levy, whether it's a developer donation or a grant or a state bonding. And so these numbers can look really scary if you think this is all coming from tax dollars too, right? And so I think we can continue over the years to refine this to better identify that. And the boat launch, for example, the conversations I recall from EDA and council was, we probably weren't going to go through with that unless we got grants. Yet in the project, you'll see that it's, there's not an amount set aside for grants. And similar with the Southwest Stormwater Project, I think it's Capital Improvement Fund, Kevin, I can't remember which one it came out of, but it's not a general levy dollar that needs to go in there, so.
It is not until 2027, so it's a little outside that two-year time frame. It's just a large project, and I know there's a lot of moving pieces. It was just, as I was flipping through, it was one that jumped out at me as to we haven't had a lot of detailed conversation on it.
And that's a good point. I was doing some research with Ryan's help, and we probably want to move that one up a little bit. I think 2027 is when we have to spend the state dollars by, so we might want to get going on it sooner, so. Okay. Good catch.
Maybe this lakeside, the shoreline project is a good one to just kind of together do a dive onto the detail. That's Parks, it's Project Parks 10. If somebody's got a page number on it, I do not.
It is on, the details are on page 213 of your packet.
Thank you.
So this is one example here where with our budget priorities, it was identified as a budget priority for council, where to keep our priority, we need to keep it on our radar. So working with staff, we put it down and put it in our plan so we wouldn't lose sight of it and slate it in for 2026. So going into that, there is work that discussions need to be had. Is this the direction we're going? Is it at that dollar amount? Is it that scope? Is at that capacity, where in previous years, it could be that, well, yes, this is a priority, nothing happens to it. Well, to get this turned around in 2025 didn't seem feasible, didn't seem based on a plan where we needed more time to look at it and more discussions to be around it. So therefore, it was put in for 2026. I think the important part for council to keep in mind, I know this is different and with concern to a levy, none of these items in here, when you look at the bonding or tax levy, is any different than what was presented last year. Meaning that if we were paying with it from a tax levy last year, that's the plan this year. If you're seeing bonding for North Shore Trail or bonding for a public works facility and other street projects, bonding was identified last year, or bonding this year, or the source is planned bonding for that. Now, it might have shifted years. I know some things shifted, for example, in streets. What year, Eureka was slated to go next year in the plan last year. Well, now it's getting pushed back a few years because we have to wait for certain things with the DNR. 12th Street got moved around. But keep in mind, it was bonding. The plan was to bond for it when we did 12th Street. Now the bonding might just be happening in a different year because of when we can slate 12th Street in. So I know, so to Kristina's point and my point previously, it's a lot of information is different. But when you look at the detailed breakdown of the funds and then broke it out by debt, there are funding sources that are there as part of the plan that was there that will be shown at future meeting dates, whether that's a tax levy, whether that's state bonding bill. And then it was just broken out by debt issuance, so it was clear that if this project is to move forward, we're gonna need debt, the city is gonna need to issue debt for those projects.
I think, if I understand though, Kevin, the exception would be the new projects that were not in last year's tenure. So the two that he highlighted at the beginnings would have an impact. And maybe those are two that are worth discussing since you haven't in previous years. So again, the Lakeside Park, the shoreline stuff is another 1.4 million in parks bonding that you hadn't planned for, correct, last year? And then, as he noted, the medians aesthetics was 775 that we haven't identified a source for, whether that's bonding or general levy dollars over a couple years. You know, those would be things that if we could get some feedback on, then we know how to tell Ellers how to handle that when they bring that back. Otherwise, we'll just have to make our best guess, and you can react to it at the next meeting. But
Was there any reason, short of council direction, on the timeline for the shoreline? Was it just we sat here and said, yes, that sounds great, let's do that as soon as possible? Or was there another reason why that timing was set for 2020, is it 2026 on the shoreline?
That was directly from your workshop upstairs where you had identified priorities for consideration for the next year's budget. So we didn't necessarily even take it and look at how, I know at the time you had said maybe look at how you could break this out. We haven't done that yet. We haven't done any sort of greater analysis or brought in any other outside consultants to look at that. But it was exclusively just based on that workshop upstairs of things you'd like us to consider for this budget.
Because did I also see there's boat launch dollars in a separate line item, is that right?
Correct, there is.
there was two that came out of that study,
Yeah,
remember?
okay.
Yep.
I don't know, feedback on the shoreline study spend?
Mayor Bain, if I might just also add, something will need to be done to the launch. In 2025, as a reminder, our lease agreement, so it's not a lease agreement, but our agreement with the DNR is up. The launch needs some work. If we keep it in that location or relocate it, we will need some funding, we believe, in 2025 or potentially early 26, but I think as soon as we start our DNR conversation, we would like to have some funding to move forward with some sort of either reconstruction of the existing launch or relocation, depending on the things that we keep finding in our conversations with the DNR.
Well, as far as that shoreline reconstruction, I mean, I think I remember right from the visual, I mean, there was a couple concepts, but they contemplated the landing being removed. So, I mean, we got to either decide if we're going to rebuild it there or move it, probably before we can know the scope of the shoreline rebuild.
And that depends on whether or not the land is available, you know.
At what cost?
Yeah, and at what cost, absolutely. Has there been any conversation about that lately at all?
We have not heard from the landowner. We did reach out to
Okay.
them.
Because land acquisition still not contemplated, right?
Correct, these costs do not include land acquisition.
I mean, I can appreciate putting it there as so it doesn't fall off, but I think there's a lot of unanswered questions before we can say, yep, let's write a check.
Maybe move it to 27 then? Is that what I'm kind of hearing as some feedback? Maybe.
Well, to Abby's point, though, I mean, something's most likely going to have to be done with the landing.
The landing part, but the shoreline, if that is, you know.
Yeah, but if we're going to be down there working, I don't know, I mean.
Did the price come from that study? Is that where we got the 1 point?
Yeah.
That's a pretty comfortable number? Is that what, based on what was proposed?
Based on what we have right now, I think we've seen that as plans refine and we develop construction plans, costs are increasing. They're not going down from our estimates. One thing I will note too that's also in the capital improvement plan specifically for parks is the construction of the Veterans Memorial. I meet with them later this week, but I have had a conversation with the committee chair about construction fall 25-26. So just thinking about the construction in Lakeside Memorial Park in general, how long we as a community want to tolerate that, phase that, that sort of thing might be something to consider.
I struggle to, I just struggle to see us having boat launch pieces solved for, and us, and this project designed and fully ready for execution. And maybe also just having a little bit of heartburn over the near-term nature and the size of, we've had a lot of park projects on the list for a very long time, and so this one leapfrogging up, it's just causing me a little bit of concern.
Yeah, I would agree. I do, though, like, I think the decision does have to come quickly here as to, are we gonna leave it, the boat launch at the same place, or relocate it? I don't see any way economically we can afford to purchase Lakeshore for a boat launch just to add to the park. It just, similar to why we said no to a trail
It's not coming
on part
together.
of North Shore. It's, I don't know how you do that. So meaning that, to your point about having to get it, it does need some work. Like, people use that and it needs to be dredged out or whatever we want to do. The decision needs to be, are we going to leave it there? And if so, let's at least spend maybe some money on that, because that is to be used a lot. People, it's a value added to the public, and so we need to focus on that. I don't know about the Lakeshore piece, but if you are down there doing some work, that maybe you can scale back some of that plan. I haven't really, I know the EDA approved that and it was their thing, but I haven't really looked that close to it.
I think one of the things we talked about was the opportunity to do it in phases. I don't think it all had to be done at once, right? Like, there was a kind of a total if you did everything together, and maybe that is just the most efficient. Maybe just given what we know today in proximity, maybe the answer is focus on boat launch, get that a little bit further built out and understanding, like, decisioned, and if that means the shoreline gets pushed a little back. This is also where I get a little, I struggle with making this decision without seeing the full list, right? Because I might say, well, yeah, let's just push it out a year, and then pushing it out a year might mean something else bursts and it's just untenable. So having that broader perspective of levy year over year really helps this decision, I think.
Mayor Bain, members of the council, we do have a meeting with the DNR in a couple weeks. So I think towards the end of July, mid to end of July, we might have some better guidance on our existing partnership with the DNR, their willingness to extend that, the idea of potentially moving it, costs associated, all those things that could help probably add to this conversation. Because you, I think, would like to see the shoreline stabilized, staff would say that that is still a priority because we do have some ongoing work. It would be my recommendation that at the moment we keep it in, but as we kind of work a little bit, we refine those numbers, because I agree that it's unlikely we're going to be able to get that whole thing done in 2025, or even reasonable or feasible or all those things. But it's likely we could probably break that up a little bit better after we know more about that boat launch and some of the other construction projects that are going to be happening in the park in the next 2 years.
So maybe we consider, so exactly what Abby said, and then we're taking the lens of what does that look like from a park experience for the shoreline, the boat launch, and the Veterans Memorial, potentially all happening around the same time. So, which.
And Mayor, because I want to just kind of continue to help orient you guys to this new planet, when you say you want to kind of see everything laid out, I know you mentioned the levy, but I also at one point in time heard you mention the other projects that had been in there. And so there is, at the bottom of 151, there's the debt issuance for parks. And then at 152, we have the park improvement fund. So the parks are kind of separated based upon if you're going to be using just general fund dollars or you're going to be doing debt.
When you say 151, do you mean
151 and 152. So
Page?
debt issuance for parks is on 151, and then park improvement fund on 152. So if you want to just look at parks from those two different funding sources, you can look at those 2 pages too, if you think that these projects should be laid out in a different order.
And just to carry on with that, the park improvements that are, the park improvement fund on page 152, you see Belts Park, you see Manor Park. With the exception of the improvements of the infields and at the golf course, where you see those parks, that is exclusively in the order of they are up or past due for their scheduled replacements. These aren't necessarily just, fun to do for the neighborhood. These are end of useful life replacements.
Earlier in the packet, there's parks and trails there's a couple different parks funds, it looks like. Am I seeing that correctly?
It's just a different description on what it is, like parks and trails means we're doing parks, we're doing some trails like within the parks as well, where with parks, it's just, more playground equipment oriented, or basketball courts, things of that nature. So that's where if you're interested in parks, since we're looking at parks, that's where you can go to those project details. You could pull out one of them, you can go there, and it'll give more details on what's happening with that project.
They'd all come from the park, they would either all come from the park improvement fund or debt, correct?
Correct, and that's how it's currently broken out. So to my point earlier, if it's in the park improvement currently, if council follows what the 10-year plan was last year to increase that levy to $500,000, this fund would be able to take care of the projects as it is currently laid out. Where again, if we're not gonna go up to that amount, then that's where staffs adjust. We move projects around to get that to reflect what those funding levels are and reprioritize, given a direction from council on how that looks. Same goes to the park improvement, the debt issuance for parks. If it's something where we don't want to do this project, then that gets taken off, that gets pushed back, whatever the direction from council is on that. Is more specifically that if you want to do Fenway, for example, and I think it's 5 years, if I'm not, or in 2028 is when Fenway Park redevelopment is, there's going to have to be debt issue there. Now, whether that's 28, 27, 29, those are discussions that we have as we get closer to there. But it's more that to let council know that that's where that funding is coming from, or if it's down in the park improvement fund, these are from the tax levy, these are from other sources that council has approved or committed to fund this plan.
Okay. Kristina, to your earlier point about some of these numbers not being netted out against other revenue sources for other government entities, what does that do? Where does this flow through to hitting a budget somewhere? Because, the work in the Southwest is an example, or even the airport fund. I mean, we know that we get, historically 95% funding against those costs. So to say we're going to spend 1.4 in 2026, that's not out of our pocket.
Right, and so that's some of the detail that I have to work through with staff as they learn this new program. I've got notes on that, and I think my suggestion would be to go back and on those project details where you see the funding sources. For airport, for example, 95% of them would be grants or bonding or whatever we want to call that. I don't want to create too many, so sometimes I come up with a donation grants, whatever, to essentially somebody else is giving us money.
Yeah.
And then the 5% would be what's coming from the airport fund, as opposed to just showing it all coming from the airport fund. That would be one of my suggestions. So then when you ran the airport fund source, you would just see that 5%. These numbers wouldn't be as large as when you look at the airport fund now, because it has the whole 100% in there. Mm-hmm. And you would have another funding source on page 145 where it has your funding source summary. You would have another, again, whether we want to call it grants, donations, state bonding, whatever we come up with, and you'd be able to break that out so you could more easily see that this is, of all this 188 million, X number is really coming from somebody other than our taxpayers, or through our property tax levy. I know state money's tax money too, but. So I think that, this is, as Kevin said, staff did a lot of work. It took a lot of work to get it to this stage. Well, you'll just have to keep refining it over the years as they get more familiar with it, as they tweak it. In one of my previous cities, council really wanted us to call out the new projects, and so we would have a category rather than active or completed, but a new recommendation. And so as these came back year after year, you would just focus on the new ones, so then it's not so overwhelming. we really want to see, what your reaction is to it and how it can be the best tool for you. There's a lot of things that Kevin can do. This is an Access database, so it's really a lot easier for him to manipulate than that Excel spreadsheet and run different reports in different ways. I think that's the greatest benefit of having this Planet program. It is a lot of work up front that they have to get it in there, but now it'll be just tweaking it. So that's what I would recommend to get that point of, and we'll have to do that when we sit down with Ellers anyways, because they're gonna wanna know, in order to figure out what that tax impact on folks is, how much of this is actually gonna be money that the city has to levy versus getting from other sources.
Well, one specific project or area that is a little bit concerning is, I wonder what the general public would think about the city spending basically $1 million on the golf course in the next 3 to 4 years.
That jumped out at me as well. Abby, your comment that those were improvements, is there currently any irrigation at the,
So I had said, with the exception of the golf course and
thank
Fenway
you.
improvements, there, Dave could speak to the infrastructure better than I could at the golf course.
okay.
It's just slated in, just like playgrounds or anything else. It's past its useful life, and it's a placeholder in there. I mean, it can be moved in or farther out or whatever. It's just, that's the $26 for what it would cost to replace that irrigation. It's, it's old PVC pipe that probably have 20, 30 breaks a year and new valves, and the whole pump station is on its last leg. So, I mean, you can limp it along like anything else. It's just, that's what it's gonna cost. I mean, that's your investment in your golf course. If you wanna keep a city golf course and keep it a nice looking golf course, that's the investment you gotta make. So it's just like a lot of the other things in here. We're just getting costs and putting it in there and plugging it into useful life.
To your point, I think that's one of the areas where there's just certain projects that I feel like we've had more discussion on and have been more thoroughly vetted, and others have been just placeholders, knowing something was going to happen at some point. So worth some more discussion for sure. What year was that? That's a 2020.
Yeah, the irrigation is the biggest number, and then there was 200,000 for cart paths, and then T-box, I think it was another 80 or something.
Okay.
Yeah, so irrigation is 26, but the tee boxes would be next year. So again, this would be the time. Don't wait till next year when Dave's done all the work to get the quotes to say you don't want to do it. I really encourage council to focus on that next year. And if you don't think it's something you want to do for 25, give us that direction now to push it out till 26. And again, Dave obviously can speak to how much time and money are we putting into doing whatever maintenance, and that might help you in those decisions. But I'll just throw this out there. It gets frustrating for staff if something's in the CIP for next year, and then all of a sudden they do the work to bring it to you and you don't want to do it. So I really encourage council to make those tough decisions this year for next year.
The other thing I noticed on here that I'm just full transparency, you have 3 Bobcats next year, and one's for water fund, one's sewer, and one's storm management, or water coming out of those funds. How do you justify just using a Bobcat then just for sewer projects, or can we use it for other uses, or?
There's one skid steer charge to the streets, one to utilities, and there's not technically a parks fund in 401, so that one is the tool cat, which is used at all the turf. So it's 3 separate pieces of equipment used in 3 different departments. One's a track skid steer, one's a wheel skid steer, and the other one's a tool cat with turf tires, but they're in different years.
Councilman Roberts, I think your question is like, I don't know what year those Bobcats are in, but when you say you see it in the water
I
fund,
thought it
sewer and
said-
storm fund,
yeah.
it's one skid steer funding split between 3 different sources.
Oh,
So then that's where when you're looking at this and you see that, if you go to the details page, that's where funding is coming from, those 3 funds, where it's a little more specific on where that funding source is, where it's one unit coming from 3 different funds, since all those funds benefit
Okay.
from that one unit.
I misunderstood your
Makes sense,
question. Yeah, so I'm taking the 3 departments and splitting that cost in thirds, whereas on the street side, you're just taking that one full payment.
Makes sense. When I saw 30,000 for a skid steer, I thought that's a hell of a deal then. So.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that good by 3. One other thing
Thanks.
I noticed that's not on there, the building maintenance fund, I mean, you get some work out in 2030 and 2031 on the senior center. There was a lot of conversation, if I recall, last year about this building and needing to keep updates. Is that in here somewhere that I'm not seeing?
So that's some discussion that staff needs to have internally. With that plan, it was a plan that was put together, but then nothing much done after that. So when I reviewed that plan this year to try to get this into here, there's a lot of things on there that, in my opinion, and this is where conversations need to happen with staff and Kristina, that are just normal maintenance and operations that need to get built into maybe an operating budget and not necessarily capital in nature. So that's where more discussions need to be had on those type of things where, when you're exactly right, like looking at last year at the buildings, there were a lot of things, but nothing what is really considered capital in nature, painting and, things like that might be something you need to do, but more of an operating type budget item. So those are discussions that we need to have that will come back in later the next month in August to see what gets fit into that capital structure.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things I would recommend that the city look at too is what your capital improvement policy is. To that point, I was shocked when I looked at, 192 projects feels like a lot, but you're a bigger city. But then when you look at the detail, I'm surprised that you would put things that are hoses and e-bikes, like things that are heavy. I forget what the level is. Is it $5,000 or less, Kevin?
10,000.
It's a pretty low threshold that you have to get into your CIP. And my point being, not that these things shouldn't be funded. I don't want anybody to interpret it that way. But those should be things that you just put into your operating budget. In my previous 2 communities, it was a $25,000 minimum before it got in here. Otherwise, you're just planning for it. You're gonna need to replace hoses every year. You're gonna need to replace bikes every year. You're gonna need to replace some of the small trailers in Public Works every year. That might be something to think about. And the money's still all coming from your general tax levy, whether you take it from the levy and put it in a capital improvement fund or equipment fund, or you just put it in an operating fund. So it's not a financial impact, but I think it might make your capital improvement plan a little easier for you to digest, and you'd really just be focusing on those big substantial projects, not just keeping things going that they've already been doing. So it's another thought I'd share with you all.
I like the idea of addressing that policy, especially given inflation.
Yeah, I would agree. Everything, there's a flip side, right? And so then that just puts more pressure on the operating budgets, and you need that, that review at some point, but it probably fits better in an operating budget. Then it's really hard to even pay any attention to something with $10,000 when it's sitting next to something that's 1.3 million. So it just, yeah. We might think that there's a level of control in having it on here, but in function, it still gets lost, so. Are we at a spot where it makes sense to, I guess, kind of further review on what is on 2025, 2026? Anything else that is kind of jumping out that we haven't had a lot of discussion on? I mentioned this only because I see it as a larger line item later on. So Manor Park is slated for just a small $125,000 in 2025. But that is slated for a much larger project that I think is part of us contemplating what's happening with the Public Works building. There's potential there, and so I don't know if that is properly slated for next year or not, but.
Tower Park
Oh,
would
I'm
be the
sorry.
one that
I
you
am-
would be referring to.
Thank you. I have my parks mixed up. I retract the full comment. Thank you.
Mayor Bain, so under concerns of Tower Park, was put in the plan last year as when if the Public Works facility is approved and a new one is built, what are we going to do with the existing location and turning into the park? So it was slated into being turned into a park in the later years. I decided internally not to throw that into park bonds because currently when the Public Works facility would possibly go forward or get built or when this would happen, it didn't seem appropriate necessarily to put that in a projection that it would be happening, whether it's in year 8, year 10, or even year 12 or things like that. Because it's not just building public works facility possibly, it's, okay, now that that's built, now what are we gonna do with this location? Is it a park, is it something else? So just, again, something to have on there so we don't lose sight of it, that there could be something large on the horizon coming forward, just so we don't lose it in conversation. We don't wanna be putting together these plans and these priorities and not having them held somewhere so they don't constantly come up, whether it's staff turnover or other reasons that, so when someone new comes on that, hey, what's this Tower Park? They can pull up the project details and see what it says. So there's at least background there as there's council turnover as well that, okay, this is where the direction we're going, this is a discussion that's been happening, just to keep that conversation moving forward.
And we did push the Public Works facility back a year from your 10-year plan last year, just because we haven't gotten going on it this year, so. It feels like you're all just trying to digest it tonight, right? And so I'm hesitant to even say, Mayor, can we recap what the direction is, because I'm not sure it's there. I wonder if it would be helpful to bring this back as a discussion item on our next agenda, and I'd ask Director Knopek to just pull out and do a presentation on those things in the next 2 years and talk through them with a little bit more detail on those, the project stuff more than, you know, again, hoses or e-bikes or trailers or whatnot. Is that something you feel like you need, or do you have some feedback you want to give us tonight to take?
I think
I think that would be great. I mean, you look at Belts Park, so we're at 1.1, but we're doing 600,000 this year, so is that?
It's an addition.
It's an addition. We don't have no plan for that. We don't have a plan, right? So, I mean, is it in detail? Maybe it is.
It is.
It is.
And by the next meeting, Councilmember Roberts
I spent a
will
little
read the
time
details.
on an administrator search here this week, so I didn't really,
there.
There's an opportunity to be more focused on 25 and 26.
I think, yeah, I think taking the feedback we've given so far, right, which has just been scattered and not, I would maybe classify it as scattered. So taking that feedback and then us walking through with some additional detail would be helpful. I think also, it's just us also just having some opportunity to ask questions about this new layout. It's a lot of great information. Future years, we will have the benefit of what Kristina mentioned, which is we can talk about what's new or what's shifting, but there's just a lot to digest in its current form.
it would be nice to have a little bit more public notification on this. I mean, just the 5 of us, we might have certain priorities, but I'd really like to hear from the public on some of these things. Like, again, $1 million on a golf course, 1.6, 1.7 on belts, just to get their feedback, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was surprised to learn that you don't have this as part of your comprehensive plan. That's right. You used to hold the public hearing through the planning commission separate from the budget, but you will obviously have your open house and public hearing on the budget later this year as well.
Is there,
Final adoption won't come until December, so I'll let you change your mind between now and then.
and this might be out there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a place on our website where anybody, member of the public, could go to our capital improvement plan and easily see that?
I believe the 10-year plan is there, and maybe we could add a draft.
The 10-year plan that was approved last year in December is on our website along with our 2024 budget. So that document is out there. We can't put this out there. It's just a direction of the council to do that. If there is going to be further discussion on it, I would maybe be hesitant to put that out there unless you feel otherwise, just as until we maybe get to that preliminary budget stages where I'm accustomed to seeing things put out there. But it is something that we can consider as well.
And our packets are all out there in public.
I mean, it's
so.
already out there.
I would, if we're gonna put it on that website, I would maybe make sure to title it draft.
Draft.
To Kevin's point.
Put a
that,
draft watermark on every page,
yeah.
just, right, draft. I also, I think we should note the milestone, right? Like, a year and a half ago, this didn't exist, and then, you know, a year ago, it started to, you know, all come together, and now we're talking about, it's kind of we're at a nice milestone of, okay, it exists, and now how can we get the information out there? So that's all, it's all positive.
So is it possible to rerun this with just the 2 years and then the detail pages for those projects in those 2 years and get to us?
Yes.
A little less to digest.
I do think it's helpful, though, to have it all out there, right? I got a question at the end of last week on, hey, has the city ever talked about a dog park, or where are we on a dog park? And I could say, oh, we're going to get an updated timeline on Monday, and could send a quick message out here saying, so here's where it is. It is helpful to see kind of when those things are planned. So. Is that enough direction for another discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
This is a mountain of work, so I appreciate it getting us to this far. It's a nice improvement. All right, I think we are at the end of our planned discussion topics. We can move into staff updates, and Jolene.
No updates.
Andy.
The only update I have is the Arts in the Park. It's in full swing. Hopefully tomorrow night there won't be any cancellation. We have country night with Gary Groden.
Good. Kristina.
No updates.
Amanda.
No updates.
Dave.
Just one update about the weed harvester. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten any comments. So the conveyor is sitting at the access or on access on Beach Drive. We used to keep it in Woodland Drive, but there's been property ownership changing, and we're not able to keep the harvester there anymore. Gotten a lot of residents concerned with that. I've told many of them that the Watershed and Lake Association are very happy that that's blocking that, because they want boats to go to Lake 1, Lake 2, and Lake 3, the accesses where there's people checking boats, so we don't bring more AIS into the lake. I hope council will be somewhat supportive of that, so we can keep that there. We don't really have a place, another place to put that harvester, so if you're getting more comments, you can have people call me, but we can also have a discussion about that at the next council meeting if we want to try to find different spots, but technically really isn't a lake access. It's a city property that happens to just have been used for decades as an access, and I've told a lot of them too that we're not taking away winter access, that you'll still be able to go out there in the winter. It's just a place where we have to unload the harvester, and like I said, I have support of the Lake Association and the Watershed are both pleasantly surprised that that is sitting there that year to keep people from going out there.
Are they using it for motorized boat access?
Most of the calls are, I can't get my pontoon in, I can't get my boat in, can you shift the conveyor over so we can use it to get in and off the lake? I mean, it's been like that for years. It may be just a learning curve. You all know Jerry Grentner, that's been here for years, preaching to us, telling us to put barricades across that landing, so
It's
he's
not
very
bacon
happy that
green.
he's been getting complaints that it's blocking that. So
Yeah.
I just making you aware, you're probably gonna get some calls, but unless otherwise directed, that will stay there for the summer for the weed harvester.
Yeah, I did notice it there. I mean, it's been an amenity of that neighborhood for a long time.
Yeah.
The few I've talked to do understand about the AIS and not wanting boats coming in and out of there, and I understand it's a local one, but also you're not stopping anybody who knows about it to come in and out, and who knows where they came from beforehand, so.
Right.
So I have.
Thank you for the update.
Yep.
Ryan.
Mayor, City Council, no updates unless you have any questions.
Chief?
Yeah, for pretty much every city department, the last few months, we've been planning and organizing for the 4th of July festivities, and especially the last couple of weeks, and we're ready for them. So we're
Fabulous.
excited, and
Very good.
hopefully we'll see everybody.
Sounds good. Chief Newman?
No updates.
And Kevin?
No updates.
Very good. We just broadly ask, we've had so much water. Are we having any concerns, issues, anything we should have on radar?
The lake is quite high. There's a lot of docks, even the city dock was underwater on Saturday. Clear Lake is up to Eureka.
Oof.
Localized flooding, Pioneer Point, some of the cul-de-sacs are underwater just because there's surcharge back the lines. But nothing super major. A lot of houses that are taking in a lot of water that are thinking their water main breaks, and we have to go and test the water just to show them that it's groundwater coming in. So hopefully we get a week here where everything kind of dries out, but it also takes a while to get back through the ground and everything to level off. All the channels coming out of Forest Lake all the way up to Comfort Lake were backed up. Last week it was backed up all the way to Applebee's Pond. I mean, everything was overflowing, so it's going down now. But yeah, hasn't been anything super major, just a lot of water.
We had some dry weather, right? Road construction projects, any delays or?
We're a little behind where submitted schedules at the pre-construction meeting, but still well within the contract specifications. They're still making good progress on the local street project. Started on the south end of the project and got 184th paved. They're going to be paving Southview by the water tower here, is it tomorrow or Wednesday? And then we'll move into the next stages of that. A couple projects haven't started yet, but they're still well within the specifications. The stormwater BMP, the only thing that's left out there is site restoration. They didn't try anything today, just thinking with rain coming tonight, if it happens. But hopefully this week that gets finished, so then that'll be done.
Okay. Okay.
County's State Highway 33 here, Everton Avenue, obviously is in the middle of major construction, so I drove through that before I came here tonight. It was easy to get around.
Okay.
So for the local neighborhood that's west of there, I know the 2 Hidden Creek apartments will have a water main shut down Wednesday, but that's been well coordinated. So they know it's coming. That'll happen at night. So.
Okay. Very good. Council, any follow-up questions? All right. Council updates, Councilmember Roberts?
Nothing this evening.
Councilmember Valento?
No updates.
Councilmember Husnick?
No updates tonight.
Councilmember Erickson?
None tonight.
And none for me either. That is the end of our planned agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.